walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
So there's a rule in life that said you're either growing or you're dying. And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again. Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion? Welcome to the Lou Holtz Podcast. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, white, black, yellow, or any color in between. This program is specifically how to coach America back to greatness, how to bring back the culture. And little did I ever realize when they asked me to do this show, and I promise I didn't volunteer to do it, but when they asked me to do it, I thought, what's an old man doing? I can't think very well. But I never once thought we'd have to talk about the situation we do today. I remember in the 70s when Title IX came out, and I was happy because I had two young women, and they'd like to compete, and I thought that was great. And lo and behold, here we are 25, 30 years later, and now we can't even have women compete against women. It's just crazy, but that's my personal feeling. So let's get to it, and we're really blessed to have a wonderful young lady. I didn't realize she was married. I didn't realize she wanted to be, I think, a dentist. But then eventually she's had a tremendous impact on society in a very positive one. She's an independent Women's Forum ambassador, graduate from the University of Kentucky. She was a 12-time All-American swimmer. She competed and tied with trans-identifying swimmer Lia Thomas at their NCAA championship. Since directly experiencing the injustice of allowing women compete against men, she's been outspoken on this issue. And why this issue is so blatantly unfair and harmful to teammates in so many ways. Thank you for joining us. That's why I can't even believe that we're having this discussion. Where in the world has this country gone that I loved and believed it was always based on fairness? Be fair. Everything was about being fair. But I am flattered and honored to have with us today Riley. It's a pleasure to have you on my show. I enjoyed hearing you speak at Mar-a-Lago a few years ago. Being a 12-time All-American swimmer is a huge accomplishment. Tell me, what do you think is the biggest contributor to your success?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on. I have been a big fan of yours for a long time, so this is super cool for me. Gosh, the biggest contributor, I would say a couple things. And I think we could define success here a couple different ways, too. If we're talking about strictly athletic success, I come from a family of athletes. So my dad, he's an SEC Hall of Famer, went on to play in the NFL for many years. My mom, she played Division I softball. My sister, she played softball. She went to Ole Miss. My brother, he's in college playing football now. All my uncles won Super Bowls, all this stuff. So I'm very fortunate to come from a family of athletes. And so playing sports was never, that was never an option in my family. I guess not playing sports. That was something that we had to do, honestly. But I'm so fortunate for that now, of course, looking back. And hard work. I really have gotten to the point where I love working hard in everything that I do. I love pressure. I love winning, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. And I think more than I love winning, I hate losing. And all of those things, I think, are a perfect combination for athletic success. But I think success more broadly, what kind of set me apart from maybe some of my peers is, one, my family. As I mentioned, outside of just athletics, I'm very fortunate to have a strong family foundation, two parents who love each other. Both sets of my grandparents love each other very much. There's not a lot of divorce around me. I have lots of siblings. We're all very close. Having gotten married young myself, like you said, family is huge to me. So that, but also my faith. My faith, my understanding that God's plan is certainly greater, even in its mysterious ways, than anything I could have planned for myself. I think those things are certainly what sets me apart from, some of my peers.
Well, very well put. I have a son-in-law who's also successful as a banker, but he swam for Notre Dame. And I had no idea the amount of work and preparation it takes to be a swimmer in college. I mean, he would swim miles every morning, then miles after it's all over. People don't have any idea.
Training inside the pool and outside of the pool. Doing 20 workouts swimming and 20 workouts in the gym to really push myself and try to become fast again.
I don't think there's any sport in the world that requires greater commitment than swimming does.
Well, I'll agree with you. I can tell you it is the amount of hours, the amount of time, the sacrifices that you have to be willing to put in. Just like you said, we practice 6 hours in the water every single day, with 3 of those hours being before 8 a.m. So you practice from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., you go to class, you come back, you practice again from 1:30 to 4:30, not to mention the time you spend in the weight room or any of the other extracurricular activities we had to do to stay fit and stay in shape. It's a lot, 10 plus miles every day.
Well, I know this, that your parents also make a supreme sacrifice, because when you start swimming, you're too young to drive, and yet you have to go there at 5 o'clock in the morning. Who take you? A mother or a father. So they make a total commitment as well. Now, you were forced to compete against trans-identifying swimmer Lia Thomas at the NCAA championship. How'd you feel entering into that race? What was your thought, your mental outlook as you approached another person, but a man this time?
Honestly, going into it, there were a lot of feelings. It's hard to put into words, because honestly, this is never a position that we would have imagined ourselves in, myself, my teammates, and my competitors. Just never a position we would have imagined ourselves in. So it kind of felt surreal until we were actually behind the blocks. I look over and there's a 6'4" man next to me. My feelings, honestly, I felt like I was going into this race with my hands tied behind my back. I felt like the conclusion, the outcome had already been set in stone before we ever even got into the water.
The woke world that's out there right now gave Lia Thomas the ability to honestly take away medals from other athletes.
Which is a very natural feeling, I think, when you look over and you see that. So, and that's the general consensus of myself and everyone else at that meet. And look, I don't claim to speak for everyone, but I do claim to speak for the overwhelming majority of us when I say that it was blatantly unfair. We felt wronged.
In Lia's case, cannot take priority over the undeniable biological fact that she's trans and has a massive physical advantage over the other athletes. I mean, you see her on the blocks, and I can see the girl standing next to her. If you look up to her, she's very tall. And the girl's thinking, I can't beat that. I'm going for second place. And it shouldn't be that way, and the NCAA has to protect women's sports. We
felt betrayed, honestly, not just in the unfair competition aspect, but even in regard to the locker room and what that scene looked like. So the whole thing, it felt like a slap in the face. It felt like a mockery, honestly, of women's sports and Title IX in its original intent.
Well, you talk about the craziness of this world today. I was shocked that you had to compete against a biological male. But I was really shocked to discover you had to share a locker room with a biological male. What was the mood in that locker room? How in the world did you navigate that?
It's impossible to put into words the feelings of you're undressing, changing. You have no idea that you're going to be sharing this locker room with the man. No one told us. There was no ways that we could have made other arrangements for ourselves or we had any prior acknowledgement of this. No, the only time we became aware we would be undressing next to this man, this 6'4", 22-year-old man who's fully intact with and exposing male genitalia, was when we were inches away, also simultaneously undressed from said man. I can't put into words. You have your back turned, and all of a sudden you hear, and again, entirely undressed, and you hear a man's voice in the locker room. Of course, it's awkward. It's embarrassing. It's uncomfortable. It was innate, really inherent for every girl in that locker room to cover themselves with their hand or their towels or their clothes or whatever they had around them.
There'd definitely be moments where I would feel really uncomfortable and just caught off guard. So for example, like I would be changing my locker and I would just, there's always people talking in the locker room, in the background, behind you, wherever. Sometimes occasionally, like I would just hear a male sounding voice and kind of just jump up and be like, oh my gosh, someone who's not supposed to be in here is here. And I would kind of feel uncomfortable, and then we were told there was nothing we could do about it. Our coaches said, no, like this person's on the team, they're gonna be in the locker room. People just felt hopeless. It wasn't that they didn't have opinions about it.
But really, I think the best way to describe how we felt was a sense of betrayal and an utter violation. And honestly, it felt traumatic. And not even necessarily traumatic because of what we were forced to see or how we were forcibly exploited. It was traumatic for me to know just how easy it was for these people who created these policies to totally dismiss our rights to privacy without even a second thought, without even bare minimum forewarning us.
As a coach myself, I'm curious. How did your coaches respond to the news that Lia Thomas will be racing against you in the NCAA championship? What do you think of the coaches of women's sports should do to protect their athletes? I feel this way as a coach. My obligation was to give our players the best chance to win, and that meant an equal playing field. That's why I get so upset with the officials, because that's my obligation. My obligation to let them know when I didn't think they were being fair. Now, obviously they were in their mind, but as a coach, you have an obligation to your athletes to make sure they have a chance to be successful. How did your coaches respond?
So I was very fortunate to have an amazing head coach who very much supported me, very much, and he would have supported me in any stance I took, but he is my best friend. Even still to this day, being graduated for almost 2 years. We still talk all the time. He's still a dear friend, honestly. So he was very much on my side and in support of me. And he called this what it was, which was unfair and harmful, honestly, to women in women's sports.
Once the season began, Thomas was leading the country in multiple events while only placing in the top 500 in those events on the men's team.
Title IX, which was just to ensure equal opportunities and prevent discrimination on the basis of sex. It felt as if we were totally throwing it out of the window in that moment. We were doing a 180 in the guise of being progressive. We were moving forward. This is progress. This is not progress. This is taking us back at least 50 years in time, 51 years in time to 1972 when Title IX was enacted. This is not progress. How can we sit here and actually say that women losing out on opportunities, women losing spots on the podium to a male is progress?
I have an amazing athletic director at University of Kentucky as well, Mitch Barnhart. He's been the AD for 20 plus years at UK, and he's one of the good ones. He's a strong Christian more than anything. He leads by example. It's just someone I really looked up to before all this. But again, his support has meant the world to me. So my coaches responded, well, at least my head coach. I will say I had an assistant coach during all of this, which was an extra added layer of pressure, who began to transition. So one of my assistant coaches is a woman, started to identify as a boy, as a man, during all of this. So that was a little tricky to navigate, and she certainly did not agree with me, and now will even still post some pretty awful things about me online and say what a terrible person I am and blah blah blah. But I really did feel a pretty immense amount of support from my university, at least from the athletic side. I will say the compliance side and the academic side, maybe I didn't feel as much support, but felt it from the athletic side. And the second part of that question is, what should coaches do? This is where, honestly, I think across the board, in virtually every realm, whether that's the NCAA, whether that's academia, whether that's corporate America, whether that's our government, our media, even our spiritual leaders, I think we as a nation right now are suffering from weak leadership. Specifically, again, a lot of these higher up positions, weak male leadership. So we need strong men. We need coaches who are willing to, just as you said, Coach Holtz, to defend their athletes parents who are willing to defend their daughters. So much of this battle has been placed almost entirely on the shoulders of young girls and women like myself. And look, I'm an adult. I can handle it. Was 21 years old at the time, but that's not to say that I wasn't still looking for the people who were supposed to be protecting us to do just that. That's their job, just as you said. So we need coaches to be willing to take a stand.
I'm very disappointed that one of the coaches had negative things to say about an athlete. I mean, that person should not be a coach. This is my personal feeling. Nothing against her or him, whoever it may be. But you're in coaching to help encourage people, not to tear them down. And you got to be there to support them when things don't go well. Whether you agree with them or not, that's your obligation as a coach. There's a statue of me at Notre Dame. We look at the statue, look at the pedestal. There's 3 words: trust, commitment, love. I didn't put them there. The players at Notre Dame put them there because that's what we believed in. That's what we stand for. That's what we want to be remembered for. But what a great recommendation you gave to your coach and the athletic director at the University of Kentucky. After that race, you showed great courage and began using your voice and story to fight to protect women's sports. What led to your decision to be vocal about this? Because you knew once you do it, everybody will jump on top of it, even though they're completely wrong.
You can see there some tense moments at San Francisco State last night after a speech by a former college swimmer. Riley Gaines was at the school to talk about her opposition to transgender athletes competing in women's sports. Well, many students weren't happy about her appearance. Gaines taking this video after her speech of protesters following her and shouting and chanting. Gaines had tied with a transgender swimmer for 5th place in the college championships last year. So the incident comes amid rising tension in the U.S. about whether trans athletes should be able to compete in the women's division. So this is other video from a conservative group that supported her speech, showing the chaos from another angle. According to University Police, officers escorted Gaines to a different location due to a, quote, disruption following the event. No one was arrested.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy decision for me because like we mentioned, for so long, I don't think I necessarily cowered. Maybe coward is the right word, but I wasn't necessarily scared to talk about it. I just, like we said, I thought someone else would. I thought a coach would say something. I thought an NCAA official would say something, or someone with political power would say something, or a parent, someone's dad, quite honestly, would come down there and yank this man out of our locker rooms, or some other swimmer. I thought someone else would do something, not me.
The new rule mandates that every school in the country must demonstrate the unfairness of male participation on each specific women's team that they offer and develop rules that minimize harm to trans-identified athletes. But what about the harm to us? Who is working to minimize the harm done to female athletes?
But then after he and I raced, after we had tied, after the NCAA insisted that he got the trophy despite the tie, because they claimed it was necessary when photos were being taken, that's really what led me to no longer being willing to wait or being willing to lie. Because honestly, at that point, I felt guilty. I felt responsible. I felt complicit because I had participated in this. I competed against the man. I got onto the podium and I smiled and I clapped and it hit me. I'm like, what in the world am I clapping for?
Lia has to have the trophy for photos. You can pose with this one, but you'll have to give it back, and you go home empty-handed, and Lia takes the trophy home. We can eventually mail you one. It felt as if I had been reduced down to a photo op. That's how I felt. I felt like, again, everything that I'd worked my entire life for was reduced to this photo opportunity to validate the feelings of a male at the expense of my own, not just my own, every female swimmer at that meet.
Because what I'm really applauding is our own erasure, our own demolition. So again, that on top of the locker room, on top of the silencing efforts that our universities use to really keep us quiet, all of those things, that's ultimately what pushed me over the edge into feeling confident and secure enough with myself and of course within the argument to take that initial stand. And I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know what it would turn into. I didn't know that it would allow me the opportunities that it has, or allow me to have the impact that we've been able to have. But here we are, and we are learning, and we are adapting, and we are certainly rolling with the punches.
Well, you know, what really scares me, not just the fact that a boy and a man competed against a woman, that's bad enough. But then while giving speeches on university campuses, you've been met with great resistance.
It's just me. I'm good. I'm trying.
That bothers me, because everybody should have the right to speak. If somebody invites you to speak, then you have to give them the opportunity to do so. But I know that you have been met with an awful lot of grievances by different people, and I say I pray for their lack of ignorance, but a lack of common sense, I guess. But what motivates you to continue to speak out, even though you've had bad experiences? And I apologize for that, because that's not the way this country should be. That's not what made this country great. Sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never harm me. Just whatever happened to having two differences of opinion. All of a sudden, if I don't like what you say, then you don't have the right to say it. It's stupid, it's ridiculous, and that's one of the reasons we have this program, is we need to get back to the basic fundamentals of what made this country great, and it wasn't that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. But when answering the question of what motivates me, you're right, we see a lot of the negative. We see a lot of the comments on social media, and we see a lot of the vitriol that I'm met with, and the physical attacks on it, and the, like, quite literally physical attacks, but also the personal attacks that I ensue. But the support that I receive, and the messages of gratitude, and the messages of people telling me, you know, you've helped me find my voice, is tenfold anything negative.
Riley, you're a gutsy woman. I've got to tell you, I've got great admiration for you and what you go through to make this point, because it's so important. It's basically the integrity of women's sport is at risk, real risk of being irrevocably destroyed. And I think that people like you should just be applauded by women around the world for making the stand you're doing, a great personal risk to yourself. So well done to you. Keep it going, and you'll always have me in your corner.
Of course. Thank you so much, Pierce.
All the best. Thanks, Riley.
I receive the positive messages 100 to 1 in comparison to the negative. And I think that's representative of society as a whole, right? The media and maybe our government and elected officials, they paint this issue as a very partisan one, as a political one, as one that's divides us and is polarizing. But this issue is unifying.
Hey, a new Gallup poll that finds that almost 70% of Americans believe athletes should compete on teams that match their gender, not their identity. And we've seen poll after poll now. This is going in the wrong direction as far as the media is concerned, because we used to see 6 in 10, 5 in 10. Now it's 7 in 10 say you were born as a biological male, you will compete against other biological males. There is a reason why steroids are banned from professional sports, because it gives you a chemical and biological advantage. So why should males compete against women? You see this with Lia Thomas. She's got legs like Saquon Barkley, and she's going against these girls half her size. It's a whole bowl of wrong, and the American people don't like it.
The big story is that the American people aren't buying this messaging, the propaganda.
Americans agree that men should not be in women's sports. So again, the amount of support I receive, and just really understanding not as much what I'm fighting for, but who I'm fighting for. I have a younger sister who is an incredible athlete. She's a gymnast, who will certainly make it to college and be very successful. That's who I'm fighting for. You know, being married for almost 2 years now, and hoping one day I get to have a daughter of my own, I can't imagine being in the position that I'm in, facing what we faced and not fighting for my future daughter. So that's what makes all of this worth it. And I guess just the solidarity and already knowing the outcome, because the Bible tells us the outcome.
Well,
so
I agree with you. One of the problems with the media is they don't try to just report, they try to pick winners and losers. Just give us the fact, let us decide for ourselves. And so that bothers me. But I got to ask you, did you have any idea you'd be competing against a man when you went to that event?
I learned about this maybe three or so months before the event. That's when I found out who Lia Thomas was. That's when I found out that he was really actually Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team, where he was below average, mediocre at best when competing against the men, to, again, now dominating the women.
And as we know, Lia Thomas's best performance pre-transition was, something like 465th in their best event, which was a distance freestyler. Miraculously, overnight they become a sprinter, and they beat 3 Olympic silver medalists from America. How amazing.
It wasn't until about 3 weeks before when the NCAA announced their final ruling on the fact that he would, in fact, be allowed to compete with the women. So, again, but it all felt like a circus at the time. It was hard to really mark up this idea of what this was going to look like until we actually saw it in real life.
What's been your favorite moment since establishing a national platform, fighting for women's sports? What's been the most rewarding thing?
Gosh, there's been a ton of positive impact that's been had. Like mentioned, we see a lot of the negative, but there's been a ton of positive. 24 states have now passed some sort of fairness in women's sports bill, which is huge considering just 3 years ago only one state had.
This morning in Jacksonville, Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law what he calls the Fairness in Women's Sports Act.
It says that athletic teams or sports that are designated for females are open to females, and we're going to go based off biology, not based off ideology when we're doing sports. The bill defines a student's biological sex based on the student's official birth certificate at the time of birth.
I've been very involved in the different proceedings and the legislative action behind a lot of these states, so that's been awesome to see. We've been working on and developing and implementing a new bill, which, Coach Holtz, I can't believe it. It's a bill that defines the word woman. I can't believe it's necessary we have to do that, but it is. We have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even answer what a woman is because she claims she's not a biologist. Well, guess what? I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So it is necessary
it's crazy.
to define the word woman.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
In the interest of fair play, what is a man?
Well, if a woman is an adult human female, then I suppose a man would be an adult human male, I would say.
I think it really is as simple as that.
It is, but it's necessary we define the word woman. I would argue that it's urgent we do such. So I've been working in different states to get that done. It's been passed in about 4 states thus far, tracking in about 13 more. I do a lot of work at the federal level. I'm actually in D.C. right now. I spend a lot of my time talking with representatives and senators, figuring out how we can advance legislation, effective ways to communicate these messages in a way that really highlights our stance is pro-woman. It's pro-fairness, it's pro-reality, it's pro-transparency, it's pro-fairness. It is not anti-anything. We are standing for women, for truth, not against anything.
I am with you completely. When all this happened, you were about to graduate, and you're headed down a completely different career path. How's your faith played a role in the journey over the last couple of years? And I know how important faith is in molding a person's character.
That's the truth. I've always been spiritual. Again, very fortunate to have that foundation in my life. But this past year and a half, 2 years maybe, I've really been spiritually awakened, I'll say. So yeah, I realized the quickest way to make God laugh in your face is to make plans for yourself. He very clearly had different plans for me. And I feel his hand on me. Every day I pray for strength, I pray for wisdom, I pray for direction, and I pray for protection. And he provides me with those things. And I realized pretty quickly, right? Like, I didn't understand our government. I didn't understand the civil process. I didn't understand civics. I knew we had 3 branches of government, but I didn't know what they did. I still don't really honestly know what they do. I don't even think they know what they do, Coach Holtz. And I realized that God, he doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And if he brings you to it, he'll certainly bring you through it, right? Just like he did with Moses, or just like he did with Joshua, who he promised a victory over the Canaanites, or just as he did with Esther before she was brought before the king. So learning to trust his calling, even when I don't want to, even when I question it, just leaning into it entirely.
Well, as my son always said to me, Dad, you want to make God laugh, you tell him what your plans are. And that is so true on the way things happen. I find it admirable that amidst all you've gone through in recent years, you've also prioritized your family. It's becoming less and less common for young women in their 20s to be married. What do you believe are the most important of family values? What advice do you have for young women? And what advice do you have for other young women who are getting ready to enter into marriage?
Gosh, it is such a blessing to have a constant through all the ups and downs. And that's what my husband is for me. He's my rock. He's someone that, of course, I confide in. I bounce ideas off of. We make each other better. He certainly makes me better. So my advice to other young girls in my position, in a society where maybe it's not common, or maybe it's not advised even, get married young. There is no bigger blessing than marriage and having someone who truly is your better half. Again, someone just who makes you better. Your best friend. And that's certainly what my husband is. I don't tell him enough, but I could not be more grateful for him.
Well, that's well said. I was married for 59 years until she passed away from cancer. And I want to tell all women that listen to this, you're the stronger sex. Make no mistake about it. We men think we are, but once we really understand the true fact, it's the women who really control our lives and the way we do things. And I've been blessed. All 4 of our children are married. And there's nothing greater than to be married to the partner for life. And the problem I have is, I don't know whether you agree with this, too many women don't want to make that commitment. They don't want to tie themselves down. Whereas making a commitment to God, making a commitment to a spouse is one of the most rewarding things you'll ever happen. And I just, congratulations on your success in that area.
Well, thank you. And yes, I agree. I think too many people look at marriage as kind of the beginning of the end. But really, to me, it's just the beginning.
There isn't anything easy about being married. I want to tell you, and my wife, she was a saint. I don't pray for her, I pray to her. She was a true saint. But there's nothing easy. But you have to understand that we got to trust one another. If you don't have trust in a marriage, you have no chance. We got to know we're totally committed to making our partner the best that they can be, and that we genuinely care about others. As we wrap this up, the theme of my show is Coaching America Back to Greatness. What do you believe needs to be done to restore the culture of this country? That's what I worry about, the culture.
Well, I think a couple things. Like I said, we need stronger leaders, again, across the board. In every realm, we need leaders who have the combination of a backbone and a moral compass. That is seemingly a rare combo, but that's what we need. We need to see strong men again, right? There's a saying, and it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And of course, it's a cycle that repeats itself. And I think the last time we had a society full of strong men was in the 1940s during World War II, right? If you think about it, these were men who were willing to lie about their age, saying they were older than what they really were so they could enlist and fight for this country.
Chick says, let's go down to the armory and enlist. I says, we're 15 years old. You have to be 18 years old. Chick said to me, Jake, we'll go down there. And when they ask you how old you are, you look them right in the eye and say, 18 years, sir. He looked up, what can I do for you, young men? Well, that gave us inspiration right there, being called young men when we were just 15-year-old boys. I said, sir, we'd like to join the National Guard. And I'm looking at him and thinking, 18. He said, what year were you born? Whoa, wait a minute. I was born in 1922. Take 3 away from that, that's 1919. 1919, sir. He says, sign right here.
And now, 80-ish years later, we have men actively lying about their sex to get into women's sports or women's prisons or women's sororities or women's bathrooms or locker rooms or whatever it might be. So we need strong men. I think that's ultimately the quickest way to put us back on track. And what I'll say, again, what I've noticed, this movement is very much, whether it's the corporate America side of things, whether it's the medicalization side of this gender ideology movement, it's very much driven by money. So we as consumers, as everyday people, as Americans, as parents, as coaches, as medical professionals, whatever, we do have the power to make change. The power is the people's. Stop giving your money to organizations and companies that hate you, to be quite frank. Invest in things that align with your values, your ideals, so you're setting up a good future for your kids, your grandkids even. Because again, these companies or whatever it might be, the NCAA, they don't follow red or blue. They certainly follow green, and we have the power there.
That's very well put. I always say this, that life's a matter of choices. Whatever happens to us is because of choices we make. And I was fortunate enough to be an officer in the Army. It was after Korea and before Vietnam, so I never saw any action, but I was in the military. And this country would be better off if everybody had to spend a year in the military because of one thing. The one thing I learned in the military, if you want to fail, you have the right to fail. You do not have the right to cause other people to fail because you don't do everything to the best of your ability and the obligation you have to the person next to you. And I think it's really missing so much that it's all about me. It's all about what's in my... We never look at what's in the best interest of the country, what's in the best interest of other people. But I am flattered and honored that you would join us. You are a real inspiration. Thank God for your courage. Keep your faith in God and your faith in your husband. I look forward to reading great things about you for years to come. Thank you for joining us, Riley.
And he walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
So there's a rule in life that you're either growing or you're dying.
And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again.
Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion?